Hi, this is Bob Weiss. I'm the host of Shaking Your World. Cheers.
Folks, welcome home. Yet another episode of Shaking Your World here at the magnificent Shakers in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on an absolutely sublime day. You could not ask for anything better. It's like Seattle, but better.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful
Gorgeous.
out. It's beautiful in here.
Well, thank you.
It's October. I can't wait for Halloween here.
Well,
So, I mean, I'm previewing stuff, but
another week, and you're going to have a little crunch feel going on here as well as you bring back all of our leaves. It's a tradition here, so we spend 3 weeks with the fallen leaves inside the house, and it just brings back, emotes all these memories of being a kid. Mm-hmm. You get the crunch, you get the smell, and it really ramps it up. But first and foremost, I must make an introduction, my friends. This is Bill the Big Unit Michaels, who is a standout on Milwaukee radio scene and well beyond that as well.
Yeah.
But we are honored to have him both as a friend of the house and to have him come in today and to chat about whatever comes up in conversation.
Whatever happens.
First things first, we have this lovely bourbon in front of us. Hard to find little guy, James McKenna. Cheers.
That's good and smooth. Nice.
And we have plenty of it.
Right.
We're also smoking a cigar from Avo Uvizian. This is their number 3. This has been around for 25 years. Part of the Davidoff family, a personal favorite of mine when I get away from the Cubans, and I hope you enjoy it.
This is a 3-hour show is what this is.
Well, depends who's talking the most, I suppose. So, the world, man, 2020, what a world, what a year this is.
My question is, I mean, how has it affected you? I mean, I know we're talking pandemic, we're talking masks and capacity, and small business owners such as yourself are all suffering. My world, sports is back. My world, I'm at home, I wake up in the morning, I work out in the gym down in the basement, I feed the dogs, and I stumble, doesn't matter what I'm wearing or if I stink or not, I stumble to the office next door in my house and I'm on the air. You still got to come in, you still got to put on a show, you still got to entertain, you still got to have patrons walk through the door and not be afraid to walk through the door.
Yeah, well, I look at this a couple of ways. One, change is inevitable, change is good, you change or you die. And this year has taught us that COVID, a terrible thing, and it's a pandemic, it kills people. That notwithstanding, life has to continue on, and you have to find a way to make it work. So we took the 3 months that we were shut down and did a tremendous amount of recrafting here. So we've got this gorgeous historic building, but we are able to take that time and we worked on everything. Each one of the ladies' rooms, redid the tile and everything. We recrafted some of water damage we had from a bad roof, put a new roof on, put air conditioning in, put a variety of things in. So most of those were cosmetic, a few mechanical things, but we really spent our time on that. We also developed this product. We're now 100 some odd different videos that we posted. We've been picked up by a competitor station for podcasts as well.
That's all right.
And
see,
so
with what I do, because yes, I'm local in Milwaukee, but I'm also, I got now 30, I don't know, I think I've lost count, like close to 30 signals.
Wow.
In 5 different states. And then we have the app, which downloads almost 10 to 20,000 a day. So it's become, as you know, it's become more than just here's my brand in this little market. It's whoever wants to witness it, whoever wants to grab it, whoever wants to take it off the shelf at any time they want, it's there for them to entertain themselves with.
Absolutely. So we also were able to reinvigorate my sauce line, my food line. We've got that in the marketplace.
Which is fantastic, by the way.
Well, thank you.
I would come down here just for the red beans and rice. The red beans and rice, the bourbon and a cigar, short of sex,
well,
that's the end of my life right there.
I'm
not coming here for that.
I'm not sure what to say about that. Well, you can reopen the brothels, I suppose, at some point, but at the moment, you're on your own.
I threw you off there a little bit, didn't I?
Yeah,
okay.
Well, here we are. So, we've also, we had an incredible summer for us because there were not sports taking place, there were not the music venues, there weren't the normal things that people could do. So as one of the 20-odd% of the bars and restaurants opened in Milwaukee this summer, we had a really good season. And I don't want to make that over someone else's loss or the fact that because people were dying we did well. I don't mean it that way. I just mean that we were in the right place and positioned ourselves correctly, I suppose. And this continues on, and obviously the governor of Wisconsin wants to, if he had his druthers, would shut everything down until after the election. Without getting too politically motivated here, I think that there is a huge problem with this pandemic because there is the scientific portion of this, and then there has been this tremendous influx of both media and politicizing, which have taken this in a completely different direction.
I completely agree.
And the average person doesn't know who to believe, and it changes on a regular basis.
That's
right?
just it. There's so much misinformation. First it was masks don't really prevent, then they do. You have to wear one. Then it was 6 feet, then it was 10 feet. Then it was don't go in a restaurant because of recirculation. Then it goes go into the restaurant. Then remember you couldn't get it if you were outside, so the beaches were full, but they wanted to shut the beaches down and telling people don't go outside, but yet you were fine outside if you had outside dining. So what the hell is it? And I think that's where the frustration of many people come in, is nobody really had the straight dope.
Right.
And that's part of the problem. So, I have friends that work in the medical field and they tell me one thing and then you hear something else and then Dr. Fauci will say something else and then you don't know if it's political, you don't know if it's real, you don't know if it's newly found. And I think that's part of the problem. And what we're dealing with and what you're going to be dealing with, you did what many other business owners did. You thought, we're going to be shut down for 2 or 3 months, we'll take this opportunity, we'll get better, we're going to come out stronger. The Harvard Business Journal published a great article about being aggressive in times of downturn. And I still to this day read that article and always remind business owners of that. But in this particular case, you don't know, there isn't light at the end of the tunnel right now. So all those business owners, such as yourself, unless it was cash, you took loans out and or borrowed against something to renovate, to upgrade, to do all of this, and then said, okay, I'll come out of this better. And then you open your doors and they say, no, you can't open your doors. And we'll let you know when you can. And you don't have an end, but you still got to make your payments. And that's why you went from, we'll just talk specifically Milwaukee, but you went from 15 to 25% of businesses may not make it, to now they're estimating anywhere from 50 to 60% may not make it. So if I'm a governor, if I'm a mayor, and we were talking about this on the way down here, what the hell am I going to be the mayor of when we come out of this? If you shut everybody down, who's your constituency? Your business owners are gone. The only people that are living downtown are the ones that are actually unable to sell homes or apartments because they're moving to other areas. So what's your constituency by the time it's all said and done?
Right, and there's no revenue coming in. You can't support the infrastructure as it is.
But the support local has been huge. A lot of people have really
Yes.
taken to that, and that's the one thing we've discovered in a pandemic is try to stay away from the big box businesses and try to stay as much local as we possibly can. Experience new things locally.
In many ways, though, this is the end of time for operations like this. Fortunately, I own the real estate. We're fine. We've been here for 30-odd years. We'll continue forward as long as I'm alive and then whoever the successors will be. But for operations that are like this, that are independent, that's not going to be the case in the new world that we're coming into. Because the government doesn't want operations like this. It's more cost effective to do business with a large corporate entity somewhere that just cuts a check for something and that's just the cost of doing business than to have to worry about someone like me that is specialized in so many different things and is outside the cookie cutter mentality that they have. So any opportunity that they have moving forward to eliminate small business, I think they want to take advantage of that.
While the trend is for the Amazons of the world, because that's what we discovered, but the trend is also for the boom of just say microbrews alone in the last 5 to 10 years has been exorbitant. We all love craft. Millennials love craft. They love something new. They love something fresh. They're not just Budweiser drinkers.
True.
They're Budweiser and then Mob Craft and then Lakefront Brewery and then their IPAs and then all these different beers that have come out. They're into the niche, and you don't find niche in big business. You find big business. So I still think there is an absolute positive need for this. There has to be. There has to be the corner pub. There has to be the place that you go where, cheers, everybody knows your name. You walk in and see a familiar face and Bob's behind the counter or out in front having a cigar and greeting you when you walk through the door. You have to have that because corporate is faceless. Correct me if I'm wrong?
No, I concur wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I'm just saying what the city wants to have happen. So they're not concerned about the demographics, they're not concerned about the marketing appeal, they're not concerned about what you, the voice of the people, want to have. They're concerned about how they want to restructure things to make it more cost effective for them. That's my perspective on that.
I agree with that. No, I completely agree with what you're saying. What I'm saying is that what their oversight is taking the human element out of it.
Right.
You're strictly dealing with dollars. And what happens is then you see the urban sprawl begins of people moving out of the city
Sure.
and back into the suburbs, because that's where you're going to find the smaller businesses, the corner pubs, neighborhoods, where everybody's kind of stooping it together and saying, hey, let's go here, let's go there. They're not going to the big cookie cutter box places. So,
Well, in the bigger perspective, I mean, AI is not that far away from us. Robotics are not that far away from us. And we're going to have that new world mentality that won't be new world, it's going to be the world, where there's a huge amount of our population which is displaced from work because there's something that can do it better. It's not someone, it's something that's going to do it.
the one thing, like in our business, years ago, we were told HD radio and satellite radio was going to put us out of business. And in music, I can understand it to a certain extent, but you still have mornings and afternoon shows because people want to know what's going on in their community, and they like somebody on the other end of the microphone or coming to them through the air or in their car or in their shower or in their work or wherever that says, I did that too. I did the same experience. I think there's a relatability there. What I don't think is relatable, music relates. Talk radio, for like what I do, you're not going to be a national guy talking Packers all the time or talking Bears all the time. And so we have a different niche, but I agree that we have become globalized, not just Americanized, but globalized in the sense of what we intake. But I still think that by the time we meander through that whole map of global, I think we still end up here in our own backyard.
Well,
That's
radio
my
in
hope.
particular, radio resonates with someone. So it's not just the human voice that's talking to you, it's the emotion that goes along with that human voice that drives that buzz, and it's the human experience. So yes, radio will always continue on. But I think a lot of industry is going to change tremendously in the very near future. So our tours are very busy. So that's one thing about us as well. And I just sent something off to staff today, and I've been in Louisville and Indianapolis last week and Nashville as well. And my experience was, if I didn't know I was in America, I wouldn't think I was in America because the streets were pretty much at 7 o'clock at night had rolled up. There's no vehicular traffic taking place. Nobody is outside walking. You can't go into bars if they're even open. They don't have bar stools open or up. Restaurants, you've got to be way the hell away from anybody else. They get more staff than they do customers. They don't have the food that's on the menu to cook. So from a logistics standpoint, they don't have product. And it was abysmal.
What is it going to take? And I don't even want to say return to normal because I don't think our sense of normalcy is going to be, it's 2 years away. But what is it going to take to feel that sense again? A vaccine? Because you got to get in order to have a vaccine work, you got to have people take it.
Yeah.
And there's so much mistrust and misinformation out there, we don't know.
I'm not necessarily a fan of the vaccine, and certainly not the way that it's being presented to us. There's a reason why vaccines generally take a longer time frame to get to market. And you can rush science only so much before something just doesn't work out right. So I don't think it is the vaccine. I think that I do believe that in the next month things are going to change after this upcoming election. Which way, I'm not sure, but I think there will be some change taking place in how we address the pandemic or how our perspective on the pandemic takes place. How things get back to normal, I think things never will get back to that sense of normalcy that we experienced. But if you look at the time frame, so if you think about how things were post World War I to 1945, in that period, things are much different than they were from 45 till, let's say, 1990 or something. And there's a shift after that. We had a few recessions take place. So society continues to evolve, right? And if you think about all these great civilizations, they've all come to an end at some point.
Right.
And I think that one of the things that works for us is that we have been so diversified for so long. We have so many different and disparate people here with different religious beliefs and a whole different concept of what takes place than other parts of the world do, that we have the ability, more than other people and places, to sustain, but we have to change. If you don't change, you die.
Right.
So we can't look at things like the same way that business was in 1970 or 1980 or whatever it might have been. This is a brand new world in so many ways. So some parts come forward, obviously, because we're not ripping everything up, but we've got to find a way to guide forward to be better than we were.
I also go by the clicks. And you said something about the media and the drive. And we live in a click society. We're all looking for as many views, as many clicks as we can possibly get. Headlines, sensationality, and such get the clicks. And I've said this for a while now. I mean, I appreciate the fact that they can tell you how many people have tested positive. We have all heard the story of a friend or a friend themselves, like myself. I tested positive, tested positive for having it at one point, but not positive at the time. But because I got tested twice, I'm now tested twice. I'm counting twice. We've had friends that have gone to get tested. They couldn't wait. They leave. They get a phone call the next day. Oh, by the way, you're positive. They're like, well, I never tested. So we've all heard that. What I want to know is not the positives. What I want to know is the hospitalizations, the severity, the real numbers of what the rates have been.
Sure.
Everything from the mortality rate to the test rate to the retest rate. Is the same person getting tested who didn't have it last week, who went and got tested again this week? That type of thing. Or the person that tested positive and went back a week later and still had it and still tested positive again. Is that 2 or is it, so all of the numbers have been skewed. And I think what we're doing is just being fed information instead. The one thing, and I said this a long time ago, with the advent of the deregulation of our business, one company can own thousands, hundreds of radio stations, televisions, newspapers, whatever. And whatever the information you want to get out is, it will be. So you don't have investigative journalism. You don't see people standing on the courthouse steps anymore. You don't see people walking the halls of City Hall anymore. I mean, think about how many stories were broke because somebody actually heard something, sitting like you and I are in a bar going, okay, I didn't know that, and then you follow up on it with a couple of phone calls. That, too much today is, I'll click, I'll look, and if I don't see it, then I'll move on.
And if I do see it, I believe it.
And if you
it must be factual, right?
exactly.
It's
If it's on the
it's gotta be
internet,
true.
it's actually factual. Yes.
Right. Well, I do think that Dr. Fauci has got to go. I think that I'm a firm believer in term limits, and I think that pertains to everything, not just the actual politician who's there. And I'm talking all the time about the fact that we have too many politicians, not enough statesmen. Part of that also goes along with the term limits. Part of that also goes along with people like Fauci as advisors who've been there for 5 presidents. It's too long. There have to be people that are epidemiologists that are as good or better than he is, that are younger, that have vital ideas, that have access to things that are taking place today, not working off the constructs that he came up with 50 years ago. And I do think that he has a tremendous political bias behind him, and I think there's also a monetary bias behind him. Now, I can't substantiate that. That's just what I think, looking at the myriad things that I read, and I try to be as impartial as possible and not just believe something because one source says something. But I do think that we have become tainted by just listening to that one source, and I think that we should be expanding our horizons, and hopefully whomever is president after November 4th is going to say, let's make a change here.
Right.
Let's bring somebody else in.
It goes back to the numbers and the misinformation. Too many voices or too many cooks in the kitchen. One voice has too much authority. You'd almost like to see a panel that's interviewed to say 7, 8, 10 that can all walk around and say, okay, this is what I think, this is what we found, this is where our studies have indicated. Put them all together, and then we can actually, almost like a town hall debate, we can actually either ask questions as human beings, as Americans, whatever you want to say, or then we can digest our own amount of information. But the problem with that is that you get a lot of people that don't read, they hear, and then they hear what they want to hear, and then they walk away saying this is fact. And you, a la Facebook, a la Google, whatever it happens to be. But I would like to see more of a diverse group for a diverse audience to say, okay, so best course of action is what? Because we were under mask mandates, and now you've got hotspots within our state. They weren't under mask mandates. We had hotspots in our state. We had social distancing, you still have hotspots. Everybody's washing their hands, not touching their face. And the other problem with this is, and this goes back to Marketing 101, they did a great job of telling everybody in the beginning, wash your hands, use the hand sanitizer, the whole thing. And then very slowly over time, it becomes white noise. It's like, okay, we've already heard that. Tell us something new. And we're not. We're just getting numbers every day, we're getting calculations every day, and then it gets into whatever we're going to click on every day. And I think, in the grand scheme of things, I think the mass media, and it's the business that I'm in, but I think we've done a rather poor job of taking sides, rather than just reporting what we believe to be is actually the best course of action, the best course of fact, and the best course of information.
I could not agree more, and I think going back 10 or 12 years ago, that one of the major news outlets would start talking about all the news you need to know. So it's not all the news that there is. It's
Right.
all the news that we think you
Right.
need to know. We're going to funnel this for you. Because you
There-
can't make
there
up
was
your own decisions, obviously.
Mike Goucher, and I bring him up because I've worked with a lot of good people over the years.
Right.
And Mike, when I came to Wisconsin, Mike was working at WTMJ
Mm-hmm.
at the time. And Mike and I were in the hallway, and one of the things that I had heard him say was, we do not make it, we report it. We are here strictly for factual information and deciphering.
Well, that's the fourth estate.
And right, and I've always tried to live by that.
Right.
And when you start to see the interjection, now, like what I do is I'm a talk show host, so I have to have an opinion, and then draw your reaction off of my opinion.
Right, of course.
But for the actual direct reporting of news, we've lost that art.
Well, Goucher was old enough to have studied Edward Murrow, right?
Correct.
And today, kids don't have a clue. They're there to look pretty in front of that camera. They're there to bias things, to do sensations reporting, which builds, of course, viewership, readership, whatever else. That's really what their mandate is, because
Right.
we have an awful lot of media people that come here, and you can't help but be behind the bar and hear the stories to realize what this is really about. It's entertainment today.
Yep.
It's not the fourth estate. It's not, we're going to dig, we're going to find out the actual source, going to find out what this is. Meh. Because maybe people don't care, because we have become so accommodated by Facebook and things like Facebook today that all we have to do is just dial up our Googler and, well, that's the answer right there.
And the other part of that is, and you're right, but you'll go through Facebook, for example, and you'll see a headline and you'll click on it and you'll read it, but you don't look at who wrote it. You know, is it politically motivated? Is it cited? Look at the website you're reading. Now, if you're reading U.S. News and World Report, if you're reading the BBC, if you're reading a lot of credible New York Times, Washington Post, if you're reading a lot of credible outlets, LA Times, okay. But some of these things I never heard of, and I have to go to the website to see what they are. And then you realize they're paid for and or very one-sided when it comes to politicians, when it comes to their own cause, when it comes to furthering a movement. So everything you're reading is now skewed.
There should be a disclaimer, shouldn't there, by the way?
You would figure, but
paid for by George Soros.
You know, you would assume that it would happen like that, but you know, there was a politician years and years and years ago in this city that said, the only thing I have to appeal to is the lowest common denominator, and I will win. And it's proven true over time.
Nothing has changed, of course.
Yeah. People need to take a little bit of time to read and do a little investigation on their own. So.
Well, I mean, this goes back to the Roman Senate, probably the Greeks before that, the Vox Populi, right? I mean, people don't have either the ability to comprehend or the time to study the material. Or the interest, perhaps, or maybe a combination thereof. That's why you elect officials to represent you.
We don't read anymore.
We don't.
We don't read anymore. The only thing we read is a headline, and then we click on it, we look for the video.
And often, by the way, that headline on Facebook doesn't correspond to what the story is anyway.
No.
Right?
And, I mean, what's been proven is that if you don't grab somebody's attention in the first 40 seconds, it's like 43.2 seconds, I think, is the click time. And if you don't have the story completed and or done, or their interest really grabbed, they click off of it, and then they go with what the headline says.
True.
And that's where we are, unfortunately. Are we talking about the downfall of a society here?
Well,
Contemplating it here in Shakers at this
from the
particular
moment
time?
that a society is born, it begins to fall, right? So yes, we are. Absolutely we are. It's a way to put a Band-Aid on this, I suppose, and carry this forward, which is the best that we can do until after the election. Hopefully we find some clarity, and we have to get some people out of offices that are predicated, or their entire mission is predicated upon the destruction of what's left of our society. Those people should not be there.
Right.
You know, good or bad, I personally think it doesn't matter to me if Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. You got to find a way to step across that aisle and, you know, shake someone's hand and find a way to bring things together. We are a people. We are a nation, for God's sake.
I completely
We
agree.
shouldn't be these disparate little groups.
I really, under the most terrible of circumstances, I appreciated all the memes and all the pictures that said, "Remember how we felt as a country after 9/11." We were all one, and now we are so far divided, and nobody will listen to anybody else. It's my opinion, it's my side, and if you don't like it, then to hell with you. And that's where we're at, and that's part of the problem. Because every now and then, somebody on the other side will say something, and you should be able to go, okay, I get that. Or, okay, that's not a terrible idea, let's expound upon that and try to, because if you do one idea together, that can lead to two, can lead to three, like ripples on a pond, and from there you go.
Well, you mentioned the New York Times at one point. So I just last night watched a piece with Barry Weiss, and she's a columnist for the New York Times. And Joe Rogan had very politely deconstructed her arguments that she just had no idea what she's talking about. And she's asking then Rogan's assistant, can you check that for me? Did I say the right thing? Am I right about that? Do you agree? See, there you are. But it was really a very pompous, very smug kind of a thing, as opposed to, I'm a journalist, and it's my job to investigate stories and to bring them to the forefront,
Right.
not to make my determinations because our current president is really an asshole, and I'm going to destroy him. That's not your job,
Right.
At least not when you're writing for the Times. Go do it somewhere else,
Right.
but that's just you as a person.
Yep.
So there are, unfortunately, she's not an exception. She is the rule today, and people with these tremendous biases. So it's not just the politicians that have to get changed. It's how we view those people bringing us the news and how we hold someone responsible for that. You can look at the court system with, it doesn't matter what a great job the cops do in bringing people in if the prosecutors don't prosecute or the judges don't sentence. So, he seems like a nice guy. That Bill is a nice young man. I'm sure he's learned his lesson. We're going to let him go.
Yeah. There's a
It's
lot of
It's
leniency.
only 2 people he killed. I mean, well, let's see what happens, right? Roll the dice, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, that happens now because, in many municipalities, people are released the same day or the same week, and they really should be away for a while. But our system is not providing that at the moment. So we have to hold those judges, those prosecutors accountable, those journalists who are displaying a tremendous bias should be held accountable. All these things should be in place that this should become a new era of accountability. It doesn't matter what it is.
It would take our time to read records. And that's the unfortunate thing about it. Remember when you used to get endorsed by the police department or endorsed by a local labor union or endorsed by a newspaper or, and we don't take enough time anymore as a society because of the 42.3 seconds to say, okay, let me check this judge's record on this particular crime, something within our area, something within our community, something that's hampering our community. Why do we get more and more crime in Milwaukee? Well, then you come to find out that they're harder on it down in Chicago as opposed to up here in Wisconsin. So, there's a lot of things you can take into account, but we have had, like we talked about the division, we have had way too much pacification of lawlessness. And it's a common... going back to we're all Americans, we're just all people, and you hate to sound cliche and stupid, but it's kind of the do unto others, and then I've said for a long time, there is a way to act with law enforcement. I'm a little biased because my son's in law enforcement, but there is a way to act with law enforcement. And I talk to these guys a lot. I play golf outings with them. I get a chance to get a sense as to what they're all about. And every one of them will say to a man, I'm not out to hurt anybody or kill anybody. All we want, and I encourage anybody that's ever had the ability to do so, go on a ride along and look at what some of these men and women have to deal with. The attitudes and the complete and utter disrespect for anybody else's rights but their own. And then how dare you infringe upon my rights if I'm doing something. And that's where we've gotten such an incredibly selfish society. But I think we are now seeing that pendulum start to swing back to say, okay, enough. It's time to stop all of this. It's time to come together and to say enough.
And when I grew up, by the way, in Wauwatosa 1,000 years ago, it was mandated that anybody who was then elected to the common council, any new public official, was mandated to go for a ride-along. What a different world it would be. And I can guarantee you that today's politicians in Wauwatosa are not going on ride-alongs.
I've done ride-alongs. I did ride-alongs with the city of Milwaukee. I've done ride-along with different municipalities where my affiliates are. I've done ride-alongs on the water boats with the Coast Guard and with the Milwaukee Police Department. And it's just, you run into a lot of the same stuff. And there's a lot of people that they'll pull over, they'll stop, they'll come onto accident scenes with, who just say thank you for being here and helping me. And nothing escalates, nothing gets out of hand. There's a mentality here right now that's what's mine is mine, and I'll do what I want, and you can't tell me no. And again, I don't know how we change that mentality. I think it starts. I've said for years, this is not about money. This is not about giving somebody whatever they want. This is all about education. It's about family. It's about fabric. It's about community. And that's not something we're going to turn around overnight. And that's part of the problem, is everybody wants something now. We're a fast food society. Give it to me now. I'm going to order it, throw it to me out of the window, make it hot, make it fresh, make it fast. And if it's wrong, I'm going to scream in your face and there's nothing you can do about it. And instead of looking at this going, we need to educate. And I hate to say to keep kids in school, but do everything you can to support them. Family fabric, fathers, mothers, both involved. all that stuff to set up some type of a value system to say, this is what I value. I value my life, I value human life, I value your life, I value my friends' lives, and people I don't know, and I have a little bit of respect. And then it's amazing how far that'll go.
Education.
Am I preaching to the choir here? I feel like I am.
Education, jobs, obviously, you've got to be able to find a way to get people to jobs, not to take them around with a silly little streetcar, but to find transportation to get to those jobs in Menominee Falls or Waukesha so they can support their families. That makes a big difference.
But
That changes
go back to the day when you went to McDonald's and you worked there, so you had a little bit of spending money. Now it's
I
supposed to
did
be,
work there, as a matter of
now,
fact.
and you had spending money, but
Yeah.
but you're not still working at McDonald's for a living wage. You know, I mean, it's I understand there's a lot of people, but again, it goes back to start when they're young, and this is the way you raise them.
Yep.
You know, and that's where we're losing it. And
Absolutely.
we become, I don't even want to say latchkey, because we're not even latchkey. We are come home, go on the internet, go do this, don't bother me, I don't have time, I've got this, I've got that. And we're that kind of society.
Sure. Johnny's in the basement of his computer.
Correct.
We don't see Johnny. He might
Correct.
come up for dinner, he might not.
Correct.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Yep.
But if they had more dinners around tables like this, maybe you cooking for them, that'll bring them down.
Well, thank you, Bill.
You're going to set the world on fire just because
Set
you're
the
going to
world
have
on fire.
red beans and rice
one
and
day.
turkey dinners.
One day, sure,
So.
just like that. So we must talk about sports because you are
Sure.
the sports authority, right?
Sure.
Okay.
I would think so. I don't know about authority, but I can BS with the best of them.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's the same thing today. So here we are. Man, the Packers, what are they doing?
Doing everything right now. You've got a quarterback that's playing at an MVP level. You've got a coach.
What's his name again?
That Aaron Rodgers
That
cat,
Aaron
yeah.
Rodgers guy, yeah.
So you've got a quarterback that's playing at an MVP level that has bought in, that has an unbelievable rapport with his head coach, that decided there's two ways to go. I can say Jordan Love is my successor, and therefore I'm going to be petulant and I'm going to be completely selfish about this, or I'm going to make it unbelievably difficult and embrace myself and immerse myself into this system. And he chose to do the latter, and it's been great.
And he's what, 38, 39?
Yeah, 38. And when you look at he wants to play 3, 4, 5 more years, there's nothing to say he can't.
Yeah.
He's had 2 seasons in which he had half seasons because of injury,
Right.
so you can kind of save a year. He didn't play for the first 3 years because of Brett Favre. So technically he could go 4 years beyond what your shelf life of a quarterback would be, which is normally 36, 37 years old. So figure 41, 42, Tom Brady. I mean, you look at what like Warren Moon started. Warren Moon went until, I think, 41, 42.
Yep.
So you look at Warren Moon and you say, okay, a lot of these quarterbacks started to get up in age, but because of their mind and their ability to read, and still as long as you have your legs and you can move, you're out of harm's way. And Rodgers is one of the smartest guys I've ever met.
And you need a good front line, too.
You need a good front line, absolutely. But I really believe it's in today's day and age, he is now getting rid of the ball. I think it's the second or third fastest now in the National Football League, where it was 1.72 seconds. You're not going to get a pass rush to him that quick. So you're going to preserve the body. You're not going to take a lot of hits. He's only had 2 sacks on the season. He's been hit 9 times, hurried. One of the sacks was he claims it was his fault after 4 games. You know, some quarterbacks have been sacked 12 times already after 4 games. So for what he's been able to accomplish and the ability, the misdirection, the play calling, the rhythm that he's got with his coach, and being able to make greatness out of a guy like Tanyan, to be able to take a guy like Devontae Adams and accentuate what he does, to not hold a grudge and bring back Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I mean, there's so many different aspects of this. And then, obviously, they finally have gotten a chance to see Aaron Jones for what he is. It took Mike McCarthy getting fired to say, hey, by the way, we got a pretty good running back here. Something that to the eyeball test sitting up in the press box where I sit, you could see. You could clearly see there was a difference when he was on the field. So, offensively speaking, they're in a really, really good state. Barring any kind of decimation because of injury, they're really good. The defense is, I think, I can't say a work in progress because it is what it is, but I think it's the manipulation of talent that all you need to do is sustain. You don't need to be great, but you need to sustain and support what the offense does. And you think, you know, Jair Alexander with that pick just before half against Minnesota, Shannon Sullivan with the pick 6 against Detroit, Zadarius Smith with the strip and the fumble. So all those things have come at key times. They've risen up and played well at key times. And you keep doing that, and then you start to get healthy again. There's not a team right now that you can look at as a juggernaut in the National Football League other than, say, Kansas City and now the Packers. You know, they're flawed in Seattle. the Bears aren't a 3-1 football team. You know, now we'll see because you've got some other teams. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a very good 3-1.
Harbaugh's still there?
Where's that?
Harbaugh in Chicago? He's still
No.
I know.
No.
Does it matter? No.
I was thinking San Francisco for a minute because that was the
Yeah.
same Harbaugh. But no, I agree. And now, you know, you got Nick Foles taking over. You got your own controversy there. I think they have a very good defense, but I don't think that offense is ready to fly yet, and they're not going to be able to score enough points to keep up with a team that can. So my mantra is to many Packers fans is why not Green Bay?
Does anybody have a Reggie
Wouldn't that be
White?
the kicker, though?
Would it be
They
phenomenal?
go to a Super Bowl in Tampa Bay, and it's a COVID, and they won't let fans in. Wouldn't that be the kicker?
Well, we'd all be happy if they got there, obviously.
Right, we'd be happy they got there, and hopefully
Yeah.
people pile into the local bars and restaurants to
Well,
view
we
it
can
and
talk
watch
about
it.
COVID, for God's sake.
You know,
So the
but-
impact, obviously some games aren't taking place because some players have COVID, right?
Right. Well, you got now 23 players and front office members combined with Tennessee that have tested positive. Stephon Gilmore for the New England Patriots has tested positive. Cam Newton came into contact with somebody. Now, they haven't said whether he did or didn't test positive, but he's in quarantine regardless. He's in the protocol. So you've had some issues, but I don't think you expected to go through an entire football season without this. I think what this is much like when the Cardinals and the Miami Marlins went through this with baseball. This is the salvo over the bow that if you don't get this right and if you go out and do something stupid, this is what can happen to your team, all because of you. And now the NFL is investigating what went on in Tennessee, and they could really come down hard on the Tennessee Titans.
So let's presume for a moment, and hopefully projecting forward, that COVID it won't be an issue next year, at least not of the magnitude that it is this year. How are we going to look at this year's season for all sports? I mean, is that going to be
On one hand,
parenthetically it was this?
On one hand, you say the Packers went into New Orleans and got a win without fans, which is a very difficult place to play. But on the other hand, you say the playing field is level for everybody. That was my argument with the NBA Finals and the playoffs. And I thought, you know, the Bucks were a great team at home. They lost that home court advantage, and that's a shame. But everybody's now the same. There's no distinction between home field, home court, being the opponent going into a hostile environment.
Sure.
You have to overcome that when you play. But now it's just, this is just a game between may the best team, best man, best scheme, best coach win. And isn't that what it should be all about to begin with? You know, the fans love it because it's our community access. It brings us together. It's our escape. It's our passion. Great. But for the teams, I think Giannis said it best. This is probably the hardest to win because of the circumstance, because they're all playing on an even surface now. There is no advantage one way or the other. And now it's just you against the other guy, and if the other guy beats you, the other guy's better. That's the way I look at it.
At least that day.
At least that day.
So I asked a question a moment ago that we kind of buzzed through, but is there a dominant defensive player like Reggie White was? Is there somebody who's got not just the skill, but that charisma, that vitality, that real push on defense that's in anyone's scheme today?
Oh, well, I mean, just here in our own backyard, there's Zadarius Smith. Khalil Mack, certainly down in Chicago. You've got numerous...
Well, they got the skill, but they don't have the charisma.
Right, that charisma, that verbose personality that when they walk into a room, it lights up. Zadarius Smith does.
Okay.
I spent time with him down in Miami this past year, and he is such a soft-spoken, likable, genuine guy.
Okay.
But when he walks in, you know he's there.
Okay.
And he's that guy. So for the Packers, I would say that's him. And he's the guy, you know, you used to hear the stories about Reggie White if a guy was having some trouble or wasn't into it, and Reggie'd show up at 11 o'clock at night on your doorstep saying, what's going on? Let's talk. Zadarius is kind of that guy. He may not be showing up at your doorstep, but he's going, hey, come here, let's talk. And he's that guy. Every team has one or two. You would assume J.J. Watt is still that dominant figure. You know, you've got Watts over there in Pittsburgh as well. They're still that dominant figure. Bosa was out in San Francisco until he went down with the injury. So you've got guys like that, a younger breed that is starting to come up, that is starting to feel themselves and say, okay, I think I can do this. And not only can I do this, I can be a superstar and take over a team at it without ego. And that's the other thing is, the guys that are the best are the ones that don't have the ego. The ego-driven guys are the ones that are the rah-rah that you kind of go, okay, great, and the minute they leave, you're like, okay, glad that's over. These guys aren't. These guys are the guys that you look at and go, that was great. That you feel really good being around a person like that. It's kind of like when you have your staff. You know, you got to be a coach, but who on your staff could you say would be the guy that you could go to and say, hey, I need some help here. And then they would go and talk to an employee and say, hey, what can I do to help you be better? What can I do to help you make better drinks, serve better food, whatever. It's that type of guy. Yeah. So I, for the Packers in our own backyard, personally speaking, it's Darius Smith.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
There you go.
Hockey. What's going on hockey?
Hockey is now done. They've gotten to their draft. Did you see the first round draft choice?
I didn't.
The first round draft choice in hockey, his mom is deaf.
Okay.
Okay. So the first pick overall in the NHL draft, they signed. And his mom busted into tears. It was really cool. If you haven't seen the video of it, it's an incredible video. It's just, it's you forget about hockey because we don't have a professional, so to speak, hockey team as far as the NHL goes. But I'll say this, the Admirals here in our own backyard, they were on their way to a Calder Cup when this whole COVID thing hit and pandemic hit. And it was just another, and kind of a forgotten byproduct of what we had going on, because we had the Bucks were the best record in the NBA.
Yep.
The Brewers looked to be anyway coming out of this and having what we thought would be a successful season. The Packers were on a roll. It shut down. The Badgers had just won the Big Ten.
Yep.
They were heading off to the NCAA tournament. We had a lot of momentum regarding college basketball. Marquette was playing good basketball. And then in our own backyard, everything was hustling and bustling, and I had never seen the bars and the restaurants so full, and we just had an energy and a spirit and a sense of community, and it just crashed.
Yep.
So, we all know Times person and or story of the year is going to be COVID.
Right.
But I think what a lot of us clamor for now is to get back out and have a drink and talk with friends. And I've always said my show is like sports in a bar with adults and arguing, and by the end of the day you can still buy a beer and still be friends and still go home.
That's the way it should be.
But I think a lot of us, while we have found other things to do with our friends or communication wise, Zooming a party isn't the same as being able to laugh and buy your buddy a drink and get a drink and cheers. And so I think that's what this year will be, the year of what we lost. Next year will be the year, hopefully, of the anticipation of what we're about to regain.
So this is in many ways like a war year during the 1940s, right? So you kind of have to address it that way. What about the Olympics? I mean, Jesus, what a mess that is.
The Olympics are going to be 2021.
Okay.
And
in Japan?
And we'll see if they just basically put everything in Tokyo on hold, and we'll see if in the next 7 months, because they got to make a decision.
Yes, they do.
And I feel the worst for the athletes who time themselves, their training, their bodies to be ready to peak at this particular time, and then they say, oh, by the way, reset it, and we'll see you in another 12
20
months.
years of sacrifice to get there.
Yes, and it's, I don't know how that's going to be affected, but if we don't find something out, I would say by February to March, we may be looking at another pushback. I mean, think about just in our own backyard, we were supposed to get the Ryder Cup too. I forgot all about that, the DNC. Whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't matter about the political side. The money that was going to come in and be put into our infrastructure. It's the year that Wisconsin was supposed to be on the map, and we completely got knocked off the map.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Isn't it going to be a testament to the people of this community, the people of this state, to kind of rebound?
Well, the tenacity required, I think, will say everything about people, the character that it will take to restart this engine and really to get ourselves back in that mode.
Right.
Again, it won't be like it was, but we hopefully will push tremendously to get as close as we can.
Right. And that's why I said, if you're a governor, if you're the mayor, you got to be careful, because while you want to preserve health and well-being, you want to preserve people to be smart and responsible, when it's all said and done, and when they say, okay, you're clear to go back out again, you got to ask yourself, whatever it is we do now, we're going to be asking ourselves, what do we have to come back to? And that's the scary thing right now.
Yeah. So we're interviewing the county exec tomorrow. Do you have any thoughts, anything you want me to ask him?
Oh, man. When Scott Walker was county exec, we used to go to concerts together.
Sure.
So get into music, find out if he goes to concerts. Because that was always one of the things with Scott Walker, that I stayed away from politics. It's not what I do.
Right.
So we would go to concerts together. He would know a band or I would know a band, and so we did that a couple of times down at Summerfest, which is another thing we lost this year. So maybe get into music, and then I'd ask him the same thing that we're talking about, saying this is in a terrible situation that we're all in. And if we continue in this particular fashion, how do you envision driving down the streets of Milwaukee? A friend of mine took some tables and put them in a street down by Fiserv, and had all his employees sit as if they were having dinner in the middle of the street. He said it was about 15 minutes before a car came by. That's not our city. And
No.
that's scary.
No.
So
As
ask him if we're going to have the tumbleweeds blowing through here
Sure.
before it's
well,
all said and done.
again, as I was just in Louisville and Nashville, you could literally sit or lay in the middle of the road and not be hit by anything for much more than 15 minutes. And even last night, leaving here, it was just downtown wasn't as desperate as those cities were, but still, nothing's going on.
That's the one thing about Milwaukee is while the world ebbs and flows, and New York ebbs and flows, and Chicago ebbs and flows, and bigger markets, we ebb and flow, but ours isn't this.
Right.
Ours is more of a
Sure.
wave. And I guess living where we do, as many friends like to put it, in the southern area of God's country, we at least can be thankful that we don't have the extremes of what other cities, larger cities, have. We have the enjoyable atmosphere that we have here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Cool.
what else is on your mind? Is that it? Do we cover we solved all the world's problems pretty much here
absolutely. Well,
with a half a cigar?
At least the country's problems.
Yeah.
So your favorite meal? What is your favorite meal of all time?
Favorite meal? Well, I grew up Italian.
Okay.
So spaghetti and meatballs.
And you make those monster meatballs,
Yes,
don't you? I'm
yes.
sorry I missed that.
Actually, I got some back at the house. I should have brought them down. But
Guess you have to
but
come
yeah,
back
now I gotta cook again. I grew up when I was a kid. My Uncle Joe Bellafiore had a restaurant, a 5-star Italian restaurant in Cincinnati. So when I was like 10 and 11, and I was always this size, so I was bussing tables as a kid. So I grew up on spaghetti and meatballs. My mom used to make a wicked roast and mashed potatoes and gravy. Very much a carb person. But tastes change, as you get older. I've always found that very intriguing, where I'll try things that I've never tried before. Like I said, I really, when I came down here and I do the red beans and rice, it's fantastic. A buddy of mine owns a bar and he does these bacon baked beans that are fantastic. There's certain dishes that you go to certain places
Sure.
for. You mark off the destination.
Sure.
And that's kind of what I like to do. But living and doing what, here and doing what I do, it's such a neat, eclectic mix of things that we have in this city, isn't it?
It is.
If I go to get wings, I go down the street.
Sure.
I go to Stenny's.
Stenny's,
If I want some of the more gourmet food that you guys have, the red beans and rice and what we had with the crawfish boil and everything upstairs was fantastic. You guys even do the pizzas and such really well. Then there's the VPN pizzas from Gino's, and so we've got a lot of good stuff. And then steaks. Everybody argues who has the best steakhouse in Milwaukee.
And your thoughts?
I'm not a big meat eater.
Okay.
I'm not a big steak eater. I the old Corpers.
Sure.
Love that. Love Moe's, and always. I think I go to Moe's as much for the food as I do to see Johnny when he's there.
Sure.
And say hi to him.
Well, you're out of the city quite a lot, so I mean, just nationally,
Yeah.
what's your best meal?
If you're going to go to steak, the Precinct, Jeff Ruby's place, one of the top ones in the country, is in Cincinnati. Down in Houston, there was a little barbecue place called Dubs, and it was fantastic. And it's where Mike Ditka held his Cigars with the Stars party during Super Bowl, and that was fantastic. I grew up as a kid, and this is going to sound stupid, but it was a fast food. It was a place called Zantigo's.
Okay.
And Zantigo's, by far, beat the hell out of Taco Bell, by far. You'd go to any bar in the middle of the night, and then you'd come out, and then you'd see the line at Zantigo's versus the line at Taco Bell. Well, Taco Bell bought them and then just kind of did away with them. But there's 3 of them in Minneapolis.
Huh?
So everybody goes to Manny's when they go to Minneapolis. That's the steak place, and that's fantastic, and it is really good food. But the first place I go to is Antigo's. I will always go there. The minute I cross that border and I head into Minneapolis, there's a little suburb just south of Minneapolis. I go to Zantigo's, and it's like eating kid food.
I'll make it a point to look it up.
It's awesome. So
Cool.
There's a lot of cool places.
Yeah. How about out of the country?
I've only been out of the country a couple of times.
And Canada doesn't count, by the way.
Yeah, Canada does not count. No. It is just different. And I am very much the flavor, the salt, the spice guy, and a lot of it, when you get out of the country,
Sure.
while it looks great, it's very bland.
Right.
And we have to Americanize it up. And
Sure.
my taste buds have not gotten to the point where I'm refined
Yeah.
enough to say, this is great.
Have you been back to Italy or Sicily?
No, I've not. As a matter of fact, we've talked about taking a trip over
Little
there,
junket
so,
might
yeah.
be nice.
Yeah.
Sure.
Someday.
Maybe the station will underwrite that.
If I could do my show there, maybe they would.
Cool. So you're obviously drinking a bourbon right now, and what do you think about this thing?
The bourbon's fantastic.
Yeah.
There's bourbons that have bite, there's bourbons that have sting, and there's bourbons that just go down, and just a warmth. And this is that.
Like a stripper on a pole, right? There you go.
There you go.
Okay.
What a metaphor.
Cool.
Yes.
Favorite cigar?
Love the aged rum-soaked Gurkhas.
Okay.
That are, they're just really, really good. I think they're the 17-year-olds, Gurkhas. What was the Cuban you gave me when I was down here?
There are so many different things.
Yeah, there's a couple of bands that I've seen that I really enjoy.
Part of guys, I've
that are,
I'm
we'll say,
rather
Cuban,
a fan of.
Cuban intimidators.
Yeah, whatever.
You know,
But
okay.
the Oil de Monterrey's are quite nice. The Romeos that we get here, and of course Monte Cristos, you just can't
Monte
pass the
Cristo
Monte Cristos,
was
yeah.
what it was, Monte Cristo,
Yeah.
because we had the Romeo and the Monte Cristo that one night.
So typically I'm down a couple times a year, and I can't get down obviously this year because of our co-vacation. So one fine day that'll open up again. But if you need something, I've got plenty of fun things to
And
play
then
with.
I, discovered a Macanudo M, which if you're into the flavored cigars, I really enjoy that. And then there's a Sweet Baby Jane.
Sure.
Those are good too, made by Drew Estate, and I really have a liking for them. And they actually use a better leaf, a better Nicaraguan leaf, so you actually feel while they're infused, you can actually taste the leaf itself.
Nicaragua, what great products are coming out of there, especially from the Esteli Valley.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
aside from your show, aside from sports, aside from politics, I guess that pretty much is everything, isn't it?
life in general.
You going anywhere soon?
We're going to travel to Tampa Bay for Super Bowl, regardless. You know, I don't even know. That's the other thing. We don't know if there's going to be Radio Row or not, but we're going. I owe it to all the good people that sponsor the program, but I think there's a flavor there that we can find, and much like you doing this and figuring out other ways to reach out, we're going to have to. Whether it's doing the show on the beach or doing the show and interviewing people down there about the impact of what's going on, like we're going through here. I think there's a lot of stories to be told, and I think there's a lot of interest there. So it's not just about the matchups of the two teams that are going to be there and the hype for that, but I think it's going to be, because I can't imagine the parties this year. I can't imagine the red carpet stuff that we get. I'm so blessed to do what I've done, and I've always said I could die tomorrow, and I'm good with that. But it's going to be different, and I think my intrigue and my curiosity is piqued by what it will be. You know, because and then will it ever be like it was? What I just because when COVID started to hit. And I'll tell you a quick story. We were in line at the Miami Convention Center. We had just come from the Hard Rock Stadium, and they had shut it down. The FBI had come in and Homeland Security and shut it down. Because it used to be they did media day at the stadium. They don't do that anymore. So we had just come from there, and we just got our credentials, and we had to go through our security check. And we're standing in line at the Miami Convention Center, and word began to break that Kobe Bryant was killed. And I'll never forget this. So we were all talking about this, and the next day I went and grabbed the USA Today because I wanted to hang on to it. And the headline was Kobe Bryant killed, helicopter crash. There was a little blurb on the side that said China with outbreak of COVID-19, and we're all like, well, what is that? You know, and then there was a warning. This could end up becoming global. You have to be careful. Blah blah blah. And I'll never forget that, because that story, as we're sitting in the airport to come home, 2 planes next to us. Next to our terminal, unloaded from China, and we're all wondering, do we have it? Are they breathing?
Who's got it?
Who's got it? And then, lo and behold, 2 months later, 3 months later, everything's beginning to shut down. I was in spring training the day that they announced Christian Yelich was signed his contract. That was the big story. Also, the big story was in baseball. Do you remember?
I don't.
The Houston Astros and their cheating scandal. That was people were coming to their ballpark banging on garbage cans and bringing bats, and they were having trouble with security, and then all of a sudden COVID hit, and we forgot all about it, because then it was about shutting down facilities, shutting down access from players. And I was trying to get out of Phoenix, and I couldn't. They kept canceling the flights. I ended up finally getting out of there, but it was at that time that we went from being this joyous society of celebrating Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid getting his first Super Bowl and the anticipation of baseball, and here we go, to, oh my God, we're all locked up at home and we're all petrified and we don't know what's going on out in the real world, and if you walk out your door and you breathe, you're going to die. And that's where we went. And we've been in that state of almost now quarantine catatonicness for some time, and it's just a different world.
And the malaise has set in.
Yeah.
Bill Michaels, cheers to you in this big new
Absolutely.
world. Thanks for being here.
You
and,
bet.
Big unit.
Anytime.
Welcome. I'll see you
Cheers.
again. Cheers. And for those of you tuning in, I appreciate your time and the opportunity to be in your house. And by all means, any questions or calls, we're ready for you. Cheers.